a lot of these people that are taking the time to sit down and write an email busting my chops about putting a few grams of sugar into a scoop of protein instead of a heavily chemically derived artificial sweetener. I want to go to their houses, wherever they live, open up their pantry, and hi, thanks for joining me, and we are going to go deep into the world of protein supplements, especially how to avoid crappy supplements with crappy ingredients. We're also going to learn which ingredients are good, which are offensive, so you can read labels astutely. We're going to learn how whey protein is made in particular, and why whey is the most potent and bioavailable of all protein powders, especially how it's vastly superior to all plant sources of protein. And we're going to understand the difference between processed foods that are offensive, we usually use the term in an offensive manner, and foods that are processed that can still be healthful, so we can be more careful with our language. And then we'll especially have the takeaway of why you should consider paying more for the highest quality product, especially when it comes to supplementation, because you're getting a concentrated dose of the supplement, with quality being all that much more important. So here we go with our dive into the world of protein supplements. If you saw my show about how protein bars are a scam and we don't need them, we don't need protein on the go, we need to average an adequate amount of protein intake over the long term, because the body is always working with assimilating amino acids, breaking them down, building them up. There's anabolic processes in the body that are going on at all times. That's building up, building muscle. There's catabolic processes going on at all times. That's breaking down protein for use as energy. And so we need in our diet an appropriate amount of protein over a long-term average. If you fast for a day, you're not going to lose all your muscle mass and waste away. If you do so for a month, you're going to have a problem, right? But if you can get that protein dialed in over the long run, that is the big goal. So we don't need protein at 2 p.m. when our energy is fading, or right before our 5 p.m. workout, like we might need a dose of carbohydrate or even fat to be used as energy. So carbs and fat are the main energy sources of the body, right? We have a lot of fat in storage for energy, and we get dietary carbohydrates for use as quick energy, both from offensive foods, heavily processed, nutrient-deficient carbs, as well as nutritious carbs that can provide a great source of energy for the working muscles. But protein is the foundation. It is the ultimate objective of the human diet, to obtain adequate protein to support all manner of bodily functions, especially the organs and systems of the body, and especially having energy for our muscles to perform, build, and maintain lean muscle mass throughout life. But we don't need it on the go during our busy day. Big difference. Why is that important? Because that's kind of what presents the protein bar as a scam, where you need something in your desk drawer or your glove box in order to make it through your busy, productive day. What you need is to average, as many experts are now recommending, around 1 gram per pound of ideal body weight in protein consumption per day. And this is a lot higher than the long established US RDA for protein. That's the recommended daily allowance. Did you know that the RDA is the survival level of whatever the nutrient is? When you look on labels and it says vitamin C, RDA, this many milligrams, that's the survival level. That's not for optimizing or for thriving. So with protein, the RDA is so you don't waste away and die. And then we've been long communicated numbers like 0.7 grams per pound of lean body mass, which is a lot lower than 1 gram per pound of ideal body weight, total body weight. So that number has creeped up in recent years as we've learned to interpret emerging research, especially the idea that too much protein consumption was somehow toxic to the body, or that too much protein consumption could compromise longevity prospects. There are still people out there banging that drum, but the great great leaders and experts in this field are citing very compelling research that the protein scare is a thing of the past, and our bodies can do just fine consuming protein at a higher level of around 1 gram per pound. Hopefully this is an active person where your muscles are needing it. If you're sedentary, overweight, you're going to want to consume fewer calories in total of every kind. But interestingly, protein is very highly satiating. So it's difficult to overconsume protein because after you have your second or third steak, you're going to be full. Or after you have your fourth, fifth, or sixth hard-boiled egg, it's going to be too much. In contrast to when we go around and have a hectic, high-stress daily life and we reach for quick energy snack in the form of heavily processed nutrient-deficient carbohydrate or the mixture of carbohydrate and fat together in sweets and treats and indulgences, we tend to overeat those, unlike with protein, because protein is so satiating. The brain knows that you've obtained enough protein and it's going to turn off or it's going to turn on those satiety switches to help keep your appetite in balance. So if you're trying to lose excess body fat and regulate this unfettered access to indulgent foods that characterizes modern life today and why we have obesity epidemic around the globe, prioritizing and emphasizing protein in the diet is going to be a huge catalyst. So when you go on to bradnutrition.com or on our store at Amazon and you see B.rad Superfuel and one of the bullet items benefits says beneficial for your fat loss goals, it's not that you're going to drink protein and melt fat away. It's when you get your protein needs met and when you get that high satiety nutrient into your body, into your brain, the signals for hormones like CCK in the stomach to tell you, hey, you're full, you're good, you got your protein for the morning, you don't need to go eating a second, third, or fourth donut from the conference room table. That's how protein can be a central component to your success, dropping excess body fat and regulating your intake of nutrient-deficient calories. So there's tremendous rationale for supplementing your diet with a high-quality protein powder because it's quite difficult when you think about how much 1 gram per pound of ideal body weight is. It's quite difficult to get that much protein in the diet. This is especially the case if you're into restrictive eating strategies such as intermittent fasting, time-restricted feeding, or anything where you're limiting your intake of all food. For example, you don't start eating until 12 p.m., then you're going to look at 2 major meals for the rest of the day, and you can only really consume, let's say, 40, 50, 60, 70 grams of protein at a single meal. Otherwise, like I said, that's a couple steaks. You're going to be full. An egg has 6 grams of protein in it, so if you eat 6 eggs, it's only 36 grams of protein. We're not likely to eat a dozen eggs at one sitting. So a concentrated protein supplement, you can see on our bag, 18 grams of protein in a single scoop of Superfuel. There's more grams in our plain whey protein isolate, but that will give you a boost that is easy to digest where you're stirring into a glass of water. It tastes just like a mildly flavored glass of water, and you have 18 grams of protein to contribute toward your daily goal. Of course, with the centerpiece or the best goal being to get prioritized access to really nutritious high protein foods, steak, eggs, animal-based proteins, of course, vastly superior to anything offered in the plant-based category because it's more difficult to break down and assimilate protein from a plant than it is from animal-based. That's human physiology. It's not Brad's opinion, but we want to emphasize great sources of animal-based protein, meat, fish, poultry, things of that nature, eggs, high-fat dairy products, things like that. Okay, so the supplement comes into play because we have that number one dietary goal of getting enough protein throughout the day. And now we want to choose really wisely to get good supplemental sources of protein as well as great dietary sources of protein. If you saw my show about how protein bars are a scam, you realize it's a really tough way to deliver a quality protein to the body because of the amount of processing necessary to make a bar that sits on a shelf in a nice shape. It's called an extruded product, extruded through machinery, usually at high temperatures, greatly altering the original ingredients, no matter how healthful the original source of protein was. You come out and you're compromising that digestibility score because of the processing involved in making any form of protein in a bar. It's not a stable place to have protein, as opposed to having a hamburger in the freezer section of the store. You come home, you cook it, it's very stable, it's very highly bioavailable. Same with a powdered whey protein supplement. Huge difference from maybe you read whey protein on the ingredients in the David bar. But if we have a reasonable discussion about it, we're talking about heavily processed in the bar example versus whey protein. Of course, it's processed to come from the cow to get in this bag, but it's processed in a much more sensible, less offensive, and more effective manner. And that was a little bit of that back and forth that I talked about on the protein show, where prominent health influencers Gary Brecka and Lane Norton got into a little hissy fit debate about the David bar and the objections to all the processed ingredients in there. Gary Brecka was calling out the company, saying, look, you're saying this is healthy, but it's heavily processed, every single thing in here, including the whey protein. Lane Norton shot back that, of course, it's processed. Most foods that we eat are processed. It doesn't inherently make them unhealthy. And I appreciate that distinction because, like I said, there's ways to process food for living and existing in modern life. Not everything we eat is going to be shot with a bow and arrow or picked off a tree or a bush and consumed directly, right? So that's why we're going to get into, in this show, the ingredients, the processing methods, and help you learn about what's a quality protein. And when we compare a heavily extruded energy bar with whey protein listed on the label to, for example, in my product, this is grass-fed cattle whey protein isolate derived from animals on small family farms, predominantly grass-fed for most of their lives in Wisconsin, sourced directly to the origin and processed in the least offensive manner possible, which is basically whey being a byproduct of the manufacturing of cheese. That's a whole lot different than the big factory and the machines making energy bars. So overall, in general, the powdered source of whey protein is going to be superior to anything in a bar. Unfortunately, when we look at the vast marketplace and the many whey protein products available, a lot of them rank from objectionable to pure crap. Unfortunately, there's some great ones. There's some very good ones that I might have a couple bones to pick with them. And then there's the crap category, and they oftentimes correlate with the ridiculous flavor options. So if you're searching for a protein and you're trying to choose between caramel swirl and birthday cake sprinkle as a flavor, and I'm not making some of this stuff up, that is your key, that this is a heavily processed product designed with quick fix taste bud appeal in mind. Gee, it seems like birthday cake is selling better than caramel swirl this month. How about if we do birthday cake 2 chocolate fudge? And that's the time when we're departing greatly from the natural, most original and bioavailable type of protein. And the whole show here was inspired by a message from a friend of mine who recommended B.rad whey protein superfuel to his friend. And his friend said, oh, I'm already good on protein. I'm consuming this product and it's much cheaper than Brad's. Why should I consider switching? And when I hit that link, I was shocked and stunned to discover what I consider to be probably the worst protein I've ever seen. And believe me, I've looked around. I've found the good ones. I've found the objectionable ones to make fun of. But this one really takes the cake. I know I mentioned birthday cake, so that's an appropriate line here. And I'm not kidding that I would not even consider feeding this to my dog due to the amount and nature of all the processed ingredients in the tub. But if you're not a nutrition expert and this well-meaning person who already purchases a protein supplement, knowing that he has that goal to increase his daily protein intake, you're not living and breathing this stuff all day. That's why I want you to do something to advocate for your health, learn from this show, learn to read labels, and get a little more sophisticated with your consumer purchase decisions. So let's start with a quick compare and contrast to the ingredient list from B.rad whey protein isolate and creatine superfuel. As you know, it's comprised of grass-fed whey protein isolate sourced directly from small family farms in Wisconsin. Of course, we have the 100% pure creatine monohydrate in there. And in the case of vanilla flavor, it's flavored with organic cane sugar, organic Madagascar vanilla bean, or in the case of peanut butter, it's flavored with real roasted peanuts. With cocoa bean, it's flavored with organic South American cocoa bean. We have a trace of what's called sunflower lecithin in the products, and this is something that prevents the powder from binding and clumping together. Sunflower lecithin is a natural fat found in sunflower seeds. It's a very common food additive and dietary supplement, and it's used as an emulsifier in protein powders at very low amounts. So it actually has some health benefits if you look it up. It is known as an antioxidant. It's a source of choline, but of course we're talking about just trace amounts in the product. So I'm not going to tout the health benefits of the sunflower lecithin in the product. Just know it's there and it's not offensive. Now let's look at the ingredient lists. If I can bust out my good pronunciation skills and see what they dumped into this tub of competitor protein product. I won't say the name. It's called Ultra Premium Protein Matrix, with 28,000 reviews on Amazon, selling over 2,000 tubs of this crap a month. First ingredient, whey protein concentrate. I'm going to compare and contrast the distinct difference between concentrate and whey protein isolate, which is much purer, vastly superior. But when you see whey protein on a label or whey protein in a product, you are mostly seeing whey protein concentrate, not isolate. Again, a little bit later, right now, I want to go through the ingredient lists in this ultra premium protein matrix. Whey protein concentrate, whey protein isolate as the second ingredient, calcium caseinate, micellar casein, milk protein isolate, dried albumin, wheat glutamine peptides, polydextrose, sunflower oil creamer comprised of sunflower oil. That's a refined industrial seed oil. You might be familiar with that as the number one dietary enemy. Also, glucose fructose composite, sodium caseinate, mono and diglycerides, dipotassium phosphate, tricalcium phosphate, soy lecithin, and tocopherols. That's what comprises the sunflower oil creamer. We also have natural and artificial flavors, medium chain triglyceride powder made with coconut and or palm oil. We have skim milk powder, disodium phosphate and silicon dioxide, soy lecithin, cellulose gum, beetroot powder, salt, sucralose, that's a very potent artificial sweetener, and acesulfame potassium, or ACE-K, a very potent and popular artificial sweetener. So, at a quick glance, you notice a lot of chemicals and a huge ingredient list to comprise this protein powder versus my Superfuel with grass-fed whey protein isolate, creatine monohydrate. We have the sugar, we have the vanilla bean, and we have the emulsifier, the lecithin, and that's it. A little faster to go recap those. Some of that stuff is going to come off okay and get a decent score, like medium chain triglyceride powder is a nice dietary supplement. It's known to help boost ketone production. But in the aggregate, when you're looking at all those chemicals and all those ingredients thrown in there, you're looking at a vastly more processed product than something with fewer ingredients that you are usually able to pronounce. More in detail later as we break down the ingredient there. That was just a quick recap, compare and contrast. And now I want to talk about whey and how it's actually made. Yes, whey. Yes, whey. No way. Yes, whey. Whey is actually a byproduct of cheese manufacturing, and the whey in the B.rad protein products comes from multi-generational family cheese makers in Wisconsin. That's right. My source had a grandfather who emigrated from Switzerland, something like 80 years ago to make his new life in the new world and make cheese. And today, this is where this whey comes from. I cannot think of a better source on the planet. And that's why I searched the entire planet, including the highly regarded protein supplements that come from New Zealand, because the cattle is 100% grass-fed over there in New Zealand. And some of these countries have very high standards for exporting product. So I will give a thumbs up to whey imported from New Zealand, even though it's a long way away, might not be as fresh as the whey you get from Wisconsin if you're ordering here in America, but there's some good stuff around the world. But I found the very best, cleanest, freshest, most potent source of the highest quality whey in the world, which is grass-fed whey protein isolate. Whey in the old days used to be discarded before people realized the tremendous health benefits. It was discarded in the process of making cheese when the separation of the curds, the cheese curds and the whey occurred, just like in the nursery rhyme, right? Remember eating your curds and whey? The whey was thrown away. Now it's high profile, very, very expensive product. I promise you. I know my product has a healthy price tag compared to other crap, but when you get really high quality whey from the cheese making process, it is a premium, high quality, food grade product. People ask me about the concerns with impurities getting into my whey protein supplement. There's been some expose articles that you can find on the internet about heavy metals found in popular protein supplements. This product that I offer you is very highly regarded because it's a food grade product. So the inspections at the facilities and through the chain of ingredients is vastly higher than a product that's classified as a supplement. You might have heard there's no FDA regulation of the supplement industry. That's why people can put whatever they want in the bottle. And there's all kinds of controversy and concern about what you're actually getting. If you Google creatine gummy scandal, you will learn that some leading brands were tested and found to have either zero or just trace amounts of creatine in the product. In other words, they were selling gummy bears, candy gummies, saying there was a bunch of creatine in there, selling them for $45 or $50 or $60, and there were zero or just trace amounts of creatine. Only until they got busted did any of this information come out, because there's no heavy regulation of the supplement industry by the FDA or any other body. But with food, of course, there are inspectors coming over all the time to the manufacturing facility where my whey is made, so you can be sure that it's free from contamination and things that you read about. Now, whey is the highest regarded, as I said, because it has the highest DIAS score, DIASS. This is a way that you can measure in the laboratory the potency, the digestibility of the type of protein. So they categorize, or they can measure protein by a DIAS score. So a plant-based protein, it won't have appropriate levels of all the essential amino acids. It will get a lower DIAS score. It stands for digestibility, intake efficiency, amino acid profile, satiety, and sustainability. Whey protein isolate with the highest DIAS score. There are also many benefits from whole foods protein. So if you measure grass-fed steak or pasture-raised eggs, they're also going to have a really high DIAS score. The snacks are going to score lower, and the plant-based sources of protein are generally going to have a lower DIAS score and some more objections. So again, the rationale for consuming a protein supplement rather than just getting your protein from steak and eggs is because it's a challenge to sit down and have those meals with those really good high DIAS score whole food sources of protein. Of course, I'm trying to do both every day and gladly taking a supplement to make sure that I get my protein needs met. So a little more detail about the cheese making and the way whey protein is made. Milk contains two main proteins. One is called casein, and the other is whey. Casein is about 80% of the protein in milk, and whey is about 20%. So in cheese making, enzymes are added to the milk which cause the casein proteins to coagulate into curds. The liquid left behind after the curdling is called whey. It contains water, lactose, that's the sugar form in milk, minerals, and the whey proteins, terms like beta-lactoglobulin and alpha-lactalbumin are the types of proteins in whey. So once the cheese curds are removed and headed over to the cheese factory, the whey liquid is drained off, and it looks like a thin, cloudy liquid, not like the powder in the supplement jar. So how are we going to get it from liquid to a sustainable powder? The whey is sent through a process of microfiltration, ultrafiltration, or ion exchange to separate out most of the lactose, the fat, the milk fat, and the water, leaving behind a higher concentration of protein. Depending on how much filtration is done, you will get a particular end result. One is called whey protein concentrate. This will be around 35 to 80% pure. Whey protein isolate is 90% or higher purity with very low lactose, very low milk sugar left over, very low milk fat left over. Basically, our protein is around 95% pure. What's left over is some minerals and some moisture. In a whey protein concentrate, which is by far the most prevalent type of protein, whey protein on the market because it's much cheaper to make, you're getting usually somewhere around 70 to 80% purity. What's left over? Lactose, milk fat, water, moisture, minerals. Now, a lot of people say, I can't do whey. Whey does numbers on my stomach. I tried taking away protein powder, but it didn't agree with me. That is most likely due to the offensive nature of lactose in around 80% of the global population. The global adult population around the world is about 80% lactose intolerant. That number is higher in those of African or Asian descent. Interestingly, those of pure Scandinavian descent are around 90% lactose tolerant. Wild times. It's one of the most recent examples of human evolution, the ability to tolerate lactose. And of course, Scandinavians come from herding populations, so they were forced to be able to handle lactose throughout their life, unlike most of the rest of the world. So if you have had a problem with whey, I can almost guarantee that you will not have that similar digestive reaction when you consume a very high quality whey protein isolate. I have a lot of people have told me I was reluctant. I tried your product, Brad. I felt fine. That's because there's very, very little lactose. There are people who are extremely medically sensitive that, when you have a peanut allergy and you can't sit next to the person on the airplane because if they open the bag of peanuts, not trying it, just opening and having the air come out, they will react because they have an extreme life or death allergy to peanuts. There are some people like that with lactose that might not want to consume any dairy product whatsoever, but this is it's entitled Virtually No Lactose in a high-quality whey protein isolate like B.rad Superfuel, B.rad whey protein isolate. That's the difference between concentrate, cheap, less pure, and isolate. There's also another kind of whey protein called whey protein hydrolysate, and that is, in fact, the most pure. It's even purer than isolate. So 95% pure, you go to hydrolysate, which is like completely pure. It's called partially pre-digested, with enzymes for easy absorption for people that have real trouble. But because of the further processing necessary and the more heat introduced, that's the less likely you're going to preserve maximum nutrient density. So when I say the whey is sent through microfiltration, ultrafiltration, or ion exchange, a quality product, this happens at low temperatures. Remember, I talked about the energy bar being extruded. Often you're inducing high temperatures, minimizing or compromising the value of the protein. So we have low temperature, microfiltered whey protein isolate. That is the gold standard you want to look for. And there's quite a few products that meet that requirement. I shouldn't say quite a few, I mean, in total, but it's, a very, very small percentage of the total protein offerings that you'll see on the internet. And then I also have objections to how a lot of them are flavored with the birthday cake and the caramel swirl and the candy apple and whatever else is out there, because I object to artificial flavors or intense chemical sweeteners. That's why my products are so much milder in comparison to the usually heavily flavored whey protein supplements. So I talked about the whey being liquid, and then it's dried using what's called a spray dryer. Hot air turns it into a fine powder. Now you have the powder ready to go in the bag. Okay, so I talked about the difference between whey protein isolate and whey protein concentrate. And then you remember some of the other ingredients that I mentioned in the competitive product lining up after whey concentrate, whey isolate: calcium caseinate, micellar casein. Remember, that's the other type of protein that's found in milk. So they pretty much put all of the milk proteins into one supplement, for better or for worse. And there are some potential objections. Some people have a casein allergy because of the particularities of how that molecule comes out in the end result. And there are some health benefits to the casein proteins. For example, it digests much slower than whey. So if you want to recover after your workout, whey is a better choice because it digests really quickly. But if you want this long, slow delivery of proteins, you can get some benefits from consuming the calcium caseinate. The calcium caseinate forms a gel in your stomach, so it's touted as a slow-burning protein, but it can cause bloating, gas, or discomfort, especially in those with dairy sensitivity, aka a casein allergy. It's commonly used in the food industry as a cheap protein filler in processed foods, protein bars, creamers, and soups because of that stability, that long burning nature. Micellar casein, similar to calcium caseinate, is made by gently filtering milk to get the casein proteins in their natural structure. It's also touted as slow digesting. And when you combine whey with micellar casein, you might see products touting that you have the best of both worlds because you're getting the fast-acting whey and the slower-burning casein. But again, most casein proteins have been known to cause bloating or stomach heaviness in sensitive people. They have that lower anabolic response to whey. They don't get into the muscles as quickly as whey, but they can have that supposed benefit of being a longer burning whey. But again, you're not burning protein for caloric energy, so I'm not quite sure the rationale for a slower burning whey. What I'm doing with the protein is using it for the building blocks of life, for my muscles, for my body. So I like that idea of a fast acting product after workouts when my muscles are most receptive to replenishment, rebuilding, and starting recovery. Here's the next ingredient, and this is a very common one in energy bars as well as protein supplements: milk protein isolate. This is made by filtering skim milk so that nearly all the lactose and fat are removed. So that term isolate is your key that it's going to be okay to consume even if you have lactose problems. This milk protein isolate is very heavily processed, and it's more difficult to extract than whey protein isolate. So it's a clean protein in terms of getting rid of the lactose that's objectionable from digestion perspective, but it's quite far removed from whole food milk. It is often known as the jack of all trades but master of none, milk protein isolate, that is. So while whey gives that really highly touted quick spike into the muscles, easily to digest and assimilate to help you recover, and we talked about the casein protein sources having that slow burn, forming the gel in your stomach and getting assimilated over time, milk protein isolate is kind of in the middle there. Some users report bloating or fullness, especially from that gel formation in your stomach. Okay, dried albumin is egg white powder. Now, egg white powder is a decent source of protein. Egg whites are a decent source of protein, but they have virtually no other nutritional value. Unlike whey, which has all these cofactors and things that boost your immune function, egg white protein, you're just getting some good protein. Remember, when it comes to the egg, the yolk has virtually all the nutritional benefits, the choline, the B and the K, and all the highly touted vitamins in a really concentrated dose. The egg yolk is one of the most nutritious sources of energy on the planet. In fact, it is the life force of the mammal, right? So the egg yolk is great. People who avoid egg yolks and get the egg white omelet, and the restaurants that partake in that bullshit are 40 or 50 years behind the emerging science of nutrition, confirming that there's no correlation between egg consumption or total dietary cholesterol consumption and blood cholesterol levels. This is a profound conclusion from the most respected and longest lasting study ever known to science, called the Framingham study. It's been going on since 1948. No correlation between dietary cholesterol consumption and blood cholesterol consumption, and no correlation between blood cholesterol levels and heart disease risk. This is old and dated news. So if you're still under the care of a physician or trafficking in these flawed notions that you want to watch your cholesterol intake to be heart healthy, you are way, way behind the times. And I advise you to find other medical professionals to rely on and get deeper into the knowledge that cholesterol is a very important molecule. And of course, when heart disease occurs for other reasons, namely oxidation and inflammation of the arteries, thanks to a high stress lifestyle, poor diet, adverse exercise practices, and so forth, the cholesterol is present, but as many experts have explained in layperson's terms, they're like firefighters at the scene of a fire. The firefighters didn't cause the fire, but they're always present at the scene of the fire. So with atherosclerosis, you're going to have cholesterol depositing on the walls of your arteries indeed, but they are not the proximate cause of heart disease. Again, not B.rad popping off on his podcast YouTube channel. It's referencing the emerging science, including the highly, highly respected Framingham study. So to reject the egg yolk, one of the most nutritious foods on planet Earth, in favor of the egg beater's carton or in favor of the egg white omelet. You know what? One restaurant I was at called it the triathlete omelet. So wrong on both strikes that triathlon is something healthy to do. I'm sorry, it's not. It's wonderful fitness aspiration and a true expression of tremendous cardiovascular fitness, but is usually not correlated with overall health and longevity because the training is too extreme, especially when you talk about the long distances like the Ironman, and then eliminating the most nutritious part of the egg, the most nutritious part of the meal, the egg yolk. Absolute joke and disgrace. The triathlete omelet. Can't remember where that was, but boy, I had a chuckle. Anyway, so the egg white's a decent source of protein, not much other nutrition to offer, and a lower DIAS score than whey protein isolate. So dried albumin, just okay. And it could be also concerning for those people who believe to have an allergy to eggs. So overall, those protein sources in the product I'm comparing, contrasting to are okay. Overall, you're getting some protein in the diet. But then when I talked about the other stuff, that's when I became really concerned and put this in the ranking of highly objectionable. So just to race through some of those other things that I read on the label: wheat glutamine peptides, conditionally essential amino acid, has some health benefits, recovery benefits. But again, these are now starting to count up on the side of the balance sheet of heavily processed agents sourced from who knows where all over the world with minimal regulation and into this concentrated form in the supplement. Polydextrose is a low-calorie sugar fiber replacer, provides bulk and sweetness, not a source of protein or vitamins. The sunflower oil creamer, when I mentioned all those ingredients, the point or the objective here is to provide a creaminess, a mouthfeel, and also to increase shelf life. Natural and artificial flavors, a small amount of what are called natural flavors are not objectionable. I had to do deep research into this because I put small amounts into the B.rad Super Drink Energy Drink and our forthcoming creatine gummy product. So these are flavoring agents that are derived from natural sources. We have a gummy that's lemon flavored, coming from botanical lemon sourced natural flavors. But again, it's made in a laboratory, coming from that plant-based natural source, delivered in very small amounts, no health objection. In contrast, anything that's artificial or chemically sourced, I'm going to have a general objection to and a general wariness to consume, because there's no reason or rationale to, when you can get something that is more natural and less processed. So getting this dose of chemicals, you can go and hear people say these are absolutely fine. The diet sodas are absolutely fine. There's nothing wrong with these extremely intense artificial sweeteners. And then you can get other leading experts, and this drum is getting beaten louder and louder in recent times, that these can compromise gut health and they can compromise insulin sensitivity. The incredibly intense, highly potent artificial sweeteners, as seen in this product, where they had sucralose, which is 600 times sweeter than sugar. That's why they're included in protein supplements, because you can put a pinch in and that'll flavor an entire 25 or 38 gram scoop without disturbing the amount of protein you're getting. And that's why people like the David Bar are bragging about their protein to total calorie ratio, because they put extremely intense sweeteners in there to not have to add a gram of horrible, scary sugar that's natural and easy to digest and assimilate by the body. So we need to quit being sugar phobic when it comes to getting things flavored correctly. In the whey protein Superfuel, we have a few grams of sugar in each product, because we wanted to do that instead of a chemical sweetener that's 600 times sweeter than sugar. And definitely, believe me, I field those emails. Why did you put a few grams of sugar in your protein? Other than that, it looks awesome. Well, it is awesome. And a little sugar going with your protein intake is going to help you perform, recover. Remember, sugar, glucose is burned in the cell for energy during your healthy, active, energetic lifestyle that is assisted by getting healthy protein intake every day and consuming reasonable amounts of carbohydrate that have nutritional value. So a few grams, boy, a lot of these people that are taking the time to sit down and write an email busting my chops about putting a few grams of sugar into a scoop of protein instead of a heavily chemically derived artificial sweetener, I want to go to their houses, wherever they live, open up their pantry and look at all the shit in there and wonder, why are you worrying about 1 or 2 or 3 grams of sugar when you're consuming all these heavily, heavily processed foods and going out and dining out indiscriminately as well. So also in this comparative product was ACE-K, acesulfame potassium, 200 times sweeter than sugar. And this is really getting called out as potentially or arguably harmful to the gut microbiome, and also concerns about how it affects metabolic function and insulin sensitivity. In other words, when you consume something that's 200 times sweeter than sugar or 600 times sweeter than sugar, but it's not really sugar, you are tricking the appetite centers in your brain that have evolved over 2 million years to respond to sweet tooth, right? We have a genetically hardwired sweet tooth, because a sweet tooth is something that ensured our survival over the long, dark, cold winters when carbohydrates were unavailable. That's right. We gorged and binged on the ripening seasons to fatten up for the winter so we could survive, just like the bears do today with their hibernation. So be glad you have a sweet tooth. Now our sweet tooths are out of control and dysregulated because we have unfettered access to indulgent foods, and we don't have long, dark, cold, harsh winters where we lack calories. So we definitely consume too much sugar and too many processed carbohydrates of all forms. But the answer turning to diet soda. I think there's been plenty of commentary over the years calling out that as highly objectionable, and possibly, as one thoughtful argument goes, when you consume this 600 times sweeter than sugar pinch and you don't actually get the sugar, it could cause your body to crave more sugar. And there's also research revealing that those who drink diet sodas versus those who drink regular soda have not wildly succeeded in weight loss. In fact, the obesity epidemic keeps climbing, even in the advent and widespread use of zero-calorie sweeteners. Now, the other thing to remember when I talk about sourcing my protein directly from small family farms in Wisconsin, going straight to the source, knowing what they're all about, visiting their facility, that's a far cry from the ingredients you see on the label, where these are largely commodity products that you find on the commodity nutrition market, sourced from all over the globe. Whoever's got the lowest price, they come in big, gigantic drums. You can import milk protein isolate from China, with all kinds of questions about the quality of the original dairy source. Remember, we give hormones, pesticides, and antibiotics to dairy in the United States of America. So mercy me, who knows what goes on in the poorly regulated countries around the world. But you don't know what you're getting, except for a discount price, because when you go to China and import milk protein isolate in its commodity form, we are talking about generally, did some research here. One of the main options is the milk protein isolate that's around 70% pure. Remember, lactose intolerant people, beware. They used hopefully low heat processing, but hopefully we don't know. But the higher the heat processing, the less likely you are to get nutritional stability. They're priced between $3 to $6 per kilogram. Minimum order quantity of 20 tons. So 20 tons coming over on the boat to get that protein into your morning smoothie. Here comes the ship, backing up to Dock 27, LA Harbor. The ship's here, our milk protein isolate. That is a far cry from the small family farms who supply the third generational family cheesemaker in Wisconsin to get you that whey protein isolate. And I don't know if you care about sustainability or your conscience when it comes to the foods you consume. I've done wonderful shows talking about the difference between commodity dark chocolate that you find in the leading brands and the highest quality artisan bean to bar designated chocolate, where the source is known, the farmers are compensated fairly. My wonderful podcast guest, Sean Askinosie, you can go back and reference that show where he talks about it in detail. But some of his takeaway lines that really shook me and stay with me, he says, if you buy an inexpensive dark chocolate bar, for example, they're usually around $1 an ounce. So you get, for $3.50, you get a 3-ounce bar. For $4, you get a bar that's 2.8 ounces, whatever, from the leading corporate brands, the Snicker bar, the Hershey bar, even the stuff that you find in Whole Foods with fancy labels like Rainforest Donation Dark Chocolate. You look on the label and it's a commodity project from unknown origin. And as Sean says, if you can get a bar and you purchase a bar at that price point, you can be sure that you are supporting child slave labor in Africa due to the ability to sell the bar for $3 for $1 an ounce. Instead, what you should expect to pay is $3 or $4 or $5 per ounce for a truly high quality, sustainably sourced, fair trade, bean to bar, dark chocolate bar. If that doesn't make an impact on you, that you're supporting child slave labor in Africa when you grab a cheap dark chocolate bar, forget about the health quality and the differences in nutritional profile. I don't know what will wake you up. Same thing with the wine community, as I had with my former podcast guest, Todd White, founder of Dry Farm Wines, where they import the old world wines grown without irrigation exclusively from Europe, the way wine was originally made, as opposed to, I believe he said 99% of all wines sourced from the United States of America are from irrigated farms. So when the grape is watered with irrigation, it becomes fat and watery, much less antioxidants because the grape did not have to battle to survive. It got a constant flood of water. When you're dry farming, that means there's no irrigation. So in times of drought, the grape becomes really robust, flavorful, and teeming with antioxidants as opposed to a overwatered or a heavily watered grape. And also in the United States, we are allowed to put in 84 different chemicals into wine that do not have to be listed on the label. It is the only consumable product in the entire food system of the United States, thanks to major aggressive lobbying. It's the only food product that does not require the ingredients to be written on the label. What are these chemicals? Generally, they are used to arrest the natural fermentation process of the grape so that it can come out and be more sweet. Why do they do that? Because they need to please the high sweet tooth American palate. We want wines that have more sweetness than the true old world wines that are fermented all the way to the extent that there is very little sugar left over from the grape and in the winemaking process, and much less alcohol than in a wine that has been chemically altered with its fermentation. So you're making wine, you're living your dream, you go to Napa, you're working in the barrels, and then boom, here comes these chemicals. Don't know which chemicals, sorry, because they're not on the label, for the sole purpose of stopping the fermentation to make it sweeter, higher alcohol content, and cheaper and more economical to produce. I'm sure also that's why you get the $2 chuck bottle of wine at Trader Joe's versus the highest quality wines and the least offensive wines. You can learn more at dryfarmwines.com. And I think I have a discount code B.rad if you're a wine drinker. I'm not, but I say if you're going to drink alcohol, oh my goodness, the least you can do is to find the least objectionable wines out there that are free from these horrible chemicals. And speaking of that, as another side note, The Hangover 1, 2, and 3, great movies, but The Hangover 1 experiences from drinking wine, Todd argues it's not really from the alcohol content like we believe. Because remember, as soon as we consume alcohol, converted into ethanol in the bloodstream and burned for energy immediately, it's burned out of the bloodstream immediately to the prioritization of all other calorie burning is put aside because, of course, it's toxic to the bloodstream. That's why you get a buzz. You've just ingested a poison. The body goes, holy crap, you're putting more poison into your body. The liver kicks into gear and we assimilate and burn off that energy right away. As we know from the charts about drinking and your blood alcohol level, you burn off the alcohol contained in an alcoholic drink around 1 drink per hour, depending on your body weight and so forth. So we burn off the alcohol very easily and efficiently. Why do we get a hangover 12 hours later? It's arguably, in Todd's words, the expert, coming from all the other crap that you ingested along with the alcohol, as well as the chemicals and the other agents that you react to in a typical commercial wine from the United States. That was a profound insight. I had no idea about any of this, and I haven't had a hangover in many decades, but boy, oh boy, is that a wake-up call to try to source the least objectionable types of alcohol, the best kind of chocolate you can find, and especially the best kind of whey protein. So I'm going to conclude by saying, look, stay away from those products with all that crap on the label, especially when you navigate down to how it's sweetened and flavored and those ridiculous flavor options that have no place in a healthy diet whatsoever. I'm talking about the birthday cake and the candy apple and the caramel swirl and the fudge brownie and the cookies and cream and actual flavors of very high selling protein supplements on Amazon. You're going to put something into your body that's in supplemental concentrated form. Make sure you navigate to the cleanest, purest product. That's why I'm so proud to present the B.rad whey protein plus creatine Superfuel and the straight whey protein isolate. If you prefer, stay away from all the high protein energy bars because a bar is simply an inferior delivery source than the whey protein powder. Forget about whey protein concentrate. I want you to go for the best. You don't need to have that 70 to 85% purity and potential objections and stomach distress from the leftover lactose. And of course, when it goes to sourcing your animal-based proteins, I'd love for you to navigate to the pasture-raised eggs, farmers market, locally raised eggs. They taste so much better and the best meat that you can afford. And I know that grass-fed steak from Erewhon at $33 a pound is going to be offensive and out of reach for most people. I won't buy something that expensive. You know I prioritize my dietary budget. I'm too scared I'm going to mess it up when I cook it. $33 for one steak. Oh my gosh. Too much pressure, man. Too much pressure. But you can navigate to affordable options. Trader Joe's has a great grass-fed steak that is fantastic, tastes great, affordable, and the price per pound there. And of course, hamburger, which, as Dr. Paul Saladino explained on a great show, has more nutritional value than steak because hamburger is grinding up some of the joint material too, which has the collagen and the other benefits. Much cheaper than steak, more nutritious. So I eat, for the most part, ground beef and other types of ground red meat, very affordable, delicious, and among the most nutritious foods you can consume on the planet, along with those pasture-raised, locally grown eggs. So we got our red meat as the centerpiece of our diet, we got our eggs, and we got our grass-fed whey protein isolate. Go to bradnutrition.com. I have that discount code for you, BRAD20, to save 20% on your order, or you can find us on Amazon at the B.rad store. We have a discount code on Amazon as well. Email podcast@bradventures.com, and I'll give you that code and answer any of your questions. I appreciate your interest so much, and especially navigating toward the best foods and supplements that you can find. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video and will hit like and subscribe below. You can visit bradkearns.com for show notes, timestamps, and helpful links. Comment on the video. We read them all. You can also email us, podcast@bradventures.com. I love to connect. And the best way to support this channel is to check out the finest quality performance nutrition supplements in the world at bradnutrition.com or at the B.rad store on Amazon.